So we're here today to go back over my controller settings. Now, I've done this video about 2.5 years ago, but I must say when I went back and looked at it, a lot of my settings have changed. So I definitely think it is time to update that video and go again and show off my current settings. You can see on screen I have my controller overlay. That will be useful for later, but let's jump in and see what I've done now with my settings. So the first thing you need to do if you are brand new to the game is go into the profile section, create yourself a profile and save it. That will just ensure when you do go to the settings menu, like so, up here you will have custom and you'll be able to save it and it won't reset every time you launch the game. Now, first off, we're going to start with the basic controls. Again, I'm not going to treat this as if you've seen the previous video. I'm going to just give it a fresh slate and I'm going to through everything as quickly and as simply as possible. Now, first off is the controls, and on the right side of the screen you will see my control overlay. I will go through each control and press the button and tell you what it does. So lean, left, right, and the stick, you can see the stick moving. Down here we do have a little inspection kind of window here where it does show you what I'm doing. My inputs do appear on screen. That'll be important later for advanced, but for now let's just focus on the controls. So throttle and brake, pretty much same as every motorbike game you've probably ever played on a console. Right trigger is my throttle, left trigger, sorry, is my front brake. Rear brake, I have it bound to my right bumper, RB. A lot of people see on my stream my RB button going like that. That's because I use it for the brake. You can see there on screen how it works. Clutch, I use my right stick. I push it in. That puts the clutch in. I pull it out, it releases the clutch. Rider, front, back, left, right, lean. I have that set automatic, so do not have anything actually set up to bound to the key to that. And direct lean, which is the most important thing in this little tab here, is 40%. Now we'll come back to this in a second. I'll give some in-game basically clips to show you exactly how it works, to give you a visualization of how it works, because this is incredibly important. That's one thing I've changed quite a lot in my time playing this game. But we're going to jump now to the advanced section. Now for me, the lean section is pretty basic. You don't really want to be changing how the bike leans, in my opinion. So first off, I'll just run through each of them and explain roughly what it does. A dead zone, basically if the controller has a small bit of a wiggle before the input is picked up, that is known as a dead zone. You can increase your dead zone. If you put your dead zone to 50, you have to move the stick. Look how much the stick is moving on the screen before anything's picked up in game. If I put it down to 0, look how much this yellow bar wiggles with very little minimum movement. That is the dead zone in the controller. So I have it set to 2, just takes out very, very fine bits, but even in the lean you kind of want it anyway, because if you wiggle your stick left and right like that, right is not going to change a whole lot, especially with a lower direct lean, but again we will cover that later. Now your linearity is how basically it goes from 0 to 100%. So at 100% it's down the middle, and basically it is 1-to-1, meaning that no matter where you are in terms of speed or position, it will match with your controller to your input in the game. If you put it to 0%, if you watch how it changes down here, the first initial input is nice and slow and then it flies along. So nice and slow, flies along. If you put it to 100%, it goes really fast and then slows down towards the end. So again, I'm going to just go normal input. It's probably hard to see through the video, but it goes really fast and slows down the last bit. So again, with lean, you want consistency, so have it 1-to-1, so your left stick or whatever you're using to lean the bike in is always exactly what your input is being put in. Now this here is called smooth. This will allow you to press and release and have a little bit of a smoother input and like a little overlay of how it carries on the movement. Also down here is your gain. This is just how much of the button you can press. So with your lean, it's minimized at 100. You can't go below 100, but if we put up to 150%, if I put the stick only halfway to the right, I've hit the end stop of the game as input. So you can see, if you look at the screen, I have a lot more wiggle room with the stick of my control overlay, where there's nothing actually happening because I've already hit the end stop. So this would make it really snappy. Now I'd never recommend that in the leaning because it's just too aggressive and will make the game unplayable. Now next, throttle, which is something I've changed quite a bit over my time. Again, some mods I actually still try and tinker with this slightly. Dead zone, don't want a dead zone. Realistically, your triggers never really get a dead zone as much. They are spring loaded, so you really don't need a dead zone. Again, linearity, you don't want the throttle being smooth and then goes fast, or you don't want it really fast and smooth. You want it just consistent to what you're doing with your input. Now the smoothing feature here works really well for this. So if you just watch down here, move the cursor, the green bar is my throttle input, and what you'll see here with this smoothing thing is if I put it to 100%, watch how slowly it builds up no matter how hard I press it. So I can really press it hard and it really takes time to build up because it really smooths out the input and puts it over time. So put back to our 30%. So basically what the 30% does for me just takes the edge off. If I get on the throttle a bit hard, it just smoothens the input just enough that'll stop me high siding, and a lot of time it can kill a bit of wheel spin and just gives me good exit speed. Now, the release does the exact same. So it's when you release the trigger how fast it goes from 100% to 0 or whatever percentage you're at. So again, we'll go to 100%. I hold it down and I release it. You can just see how slowly the bar drops down. Now, again, you don't really want it that high, because if you come into a braking zone and you have an extra like second of throttle, you're going to be braking while the bike's still accelerating. It's not ideal. The only reason I have it on 10%, we'll just get it back down there, is that when you release it, it just slows it down slightly. What happens in this game with the weight transfer, if you take the weight off any particular part of the bike, especially the front end, too quickly, you can lead to the front end sliding out and you crashing. So you'll notice in my braking and throttle inputs, it just slightly, I would like to say, kind of smoothens out the weight transfer off the front when, or onto the back, onto the front, or whatever way the bike is going, whatever, it just smoothens the input. What you want to be on a bike is very smooth and kind of conscious of your inputs, how they affect the bike. So again, a lot of these inputs are just to smoothen out and just to kind of think of a knife through butter, just trying to take the edge off it, just try to be nice and kind of gradual and smooth. And yeah, and the gain then as well is 100%. So again, we're going to go now to my front brake. Now this is where I start to play with the linearities, and again, there's some crazy stuff going on here which I will explain. So again, don't want a dead zone. Linearity is 150%. So again, if you actually hover over it, it gives you an in-game description. Feel free to pause there and have a look at what it says. But again, it probably just breaks down what I said in a different way. So by having linearity on the front brake at 150%, it just speeds up the very initial grab of the brake, and then the very last bit really smoothens out. So if you think of it, when you get on the brake, you want to be nice and firm for the first maybe 50%, and then it's when you go from 50 to 70 to 90%, that's the real critical zone. If you get that wrong, the bike will snap, it will stoppy, it will pump, it will lock the front, it will do all these nasty things. So what I feel is that the more I squeeze the trigger, the harder it is. It's almost like a real hydraulic system where the more pressure you pull in the lever, the harder it is to get more and more and more. So my trigger, even though you don't feel it through the controller, the input in game works that way, where the more pressure I put into it, it kind of slows down and drags back. So for me to get the real last bit of the brake, I'm really hard on the trigger, which gives me good feeling in game. Now, again, the press and release I have set up again. So again, the press, no matter how hard I press it, it's really nice and smooth, because I did mention there that the linearity speeds up the first input, but what I've done is I've put the press really high so that even though it speeds the input up, it also smooths it out. So again, it's a bit of a science just to get your controller set up in the way you like it, and I've been running these settings now for a long time and I've played with them a lot, so I'm pretty happy with the settings I'm sharing today that they're pretty decent. But again, I always do suggest in these videos, try my settings. If you don't like them, make your own. I'm giving you all the information here. You have no reason why you can't make your own. So again, play with these and make your own. But for me, 75% is lovely, really smoothens the brake. And again, you always want a nice consistent braking. You never want to be going, like if we put the press down to 0, imagine trying to brake with that, you'd be absolutely over the bar every time. So again, 75% is lovely. And we do have our 5% release, and that just slows down the input coming off, because again, if you're hard on the front brake, the nose is buried. As soon as you release the front brake, bike rebounds, the rear compresses slightly as the weight comes off it, and you take weight off the front, and that is when a lot of crashes happen. You see it in real life so much. Just as the weight comes off the front, that is where the front tire loses grip. The release for me just smooths out. You could even put it higher, but the only thing is it will actually slightly drag the brake a bit longer if we put it up to, just go 75% where my release is, or my press is. Watch how slowly it comes off. It probably isn't a bad thing, because it will really give you nice turning and it will give you nice consistent coming off the brake. It probably could be something I could experiment having the release a little bit higher. It's something I probably will try sometime in the future, running release this high. But for now, 5, 10, 15% is where I'm at. I'm going to leave it at 10% here. Look, we've made a change in the video. Again, I won't notice 5% in my input at all, but it's just, again, it just slightly takes the weight off the front in a nicer, smoother action. And again, you see our gain 100%. You can go to 50% gain, which is quite funny. That will only allow you to use 50% of your front brake, which I would definitely not recommend. You can also go to 200%, which means half of the trigger equals 100% brake, which again, do not recommend. Next up is something as well. I run a little bit of a queer and quirky rear brake. So 0% Z zone. Linearity, again, we've already pretty much explained this again. So very first part, the input is quick and then smoothens down the later into the trigger or into the button press that it gets. Now the smoothing as well is turned on for this one, 65%. So if you look in the bottom again, I'll just press my rear brake. You can also see down the bottom the gain is adjusted to 81%. That means I can never go to full potential in the rear brake. That allows me, because on a controller you only have a left trigger and a right trigger, which has already been taken up with the front brake for your left trigger and the throttle for your front for your right trigger. Jeez, getting all confused with my lefts and right here. So basically, the rear brake in real life, they've gone to a thumb rear brake, a lot of people, because you have so much more feeling and you can really kind of control it better. Whereas through your leg and through your boot and through your little lever on the bike, it's quite hard to get it really smooth. So a lot of people for a lot of time in real life didn't use the rear brake because it was just too of a hassle trying to get this set up. Right now that we have these kind of scooter style rear brakes on the bike and we have the thumb rear brakes, it's so much more user friendly. That's kind of what I've tried to use here by making the button have a little less than 100% gain. It means that I can get to really strong rear brake, but if I can control it not going too high to the point where it either locks the rear or slides too much or does something that I'm not happy with. So for me, definitely play around with this. And again, even if the gain is a little bit too low, you can adjust the master cylinder in game in the setup, which then allows you to get more. So it's all these, find these little balances just to find these 1% here and there that will give you a good feeling. But again, we look at the 65% press, it just smooths out the input. Again, on a controller, it's quite easy to get aggressive and really press the button hard and really push and kind of get ahead of yourself and think that I'm going to really get on the throttle, I'm going to get on the front brake really aggressively. But in the game, I have it set up that if I am overriding, the game kind of doesn't allow me. It does nothing. It doesn't really affect my controller because my controller is set up in a way that I'm constantly riding smooth and in a decent manner. And that kind of helps when if I'm in a battle and I'm really trying to kind of, if you get worked up and the kind of stress builds, that you can get to a point where you press the triggers way too hard. These advanced settings here really smoothen out your input. So again, about 5% release. I wouldn't recommend running it any higher because with the rear brake, if it does drag any bit at all, the rear end will start to slide around you. So again, 5% or even less. To be honest, you could run 0% on this because the rear brake, once you get off it, you want to be off it completely. Now, so the clutch, I've changed quite a bit from the previous video. Now, I used to have it set up that the linearity was set in a way that the very first release of the clutch was really fast, and I would get to the point where near the buy point for a lot of bikes, it would start to smooth down and it would release the clutch nicely across that crossover point. And on some mods, I was like Danny Pedrosa in the late 2000s, I would bullet off the line. But the issue was, from mod to mod, it was inconsistent. Some mods it didn't work at all, some it did well, and some it was kind of hit or miss whether I got it right or not. So what I've actually done is scrapped it completely, and now I basically have a nice input that is basically, as I release it, it's nice and smooth, but at the same time, it's not set up weird that I don't have any long presses or releases like I used to have before. I've just changed the dead zone. The only reason I have the dead zone is that a lot of time when you're looking around, I use this right stick to look around, and you don't want to slightly drag the clutch if you do look slightly left and up, for example. You could run a much higher dead zone, probably wouldn't affect the actual input at all. It just stops you, if you like me, have your look button bound to your right stick. You don't want to kind of drag your clutch every once in a while. But for me, I don't want to press, I don't want to release, I want it all in the stick. I want it nice and smooth as possible. And again, I don't adjust the gain as there's no really need to, because with the clutch you want a nice long progressive clutch. If you adjust the gain, it'll become more snappy and in a shorter little window. Now, I don't manually control front, back or left, right lean, so I don't have anything adjusted in there. But now let's jump over and explain the elephant in the room. That's direct lean. Now, the direct lean, simply said, if you put it to 0%, the bike will not sit up itself. So direct lean is how much the bike naturally kind of sits itself back up to the neutral straight line position. If it's on 0%, I'll put a clip on screen now. And if it's on 100%, you will see a clip now. Now, the difference is basically is how much aggression the rider, I mightn't explain this exactly how it works, but I'll explain it in a way that you'll understand it as a viewer and as a player. The higher the value, the stronger the rider pushes the bike back to central. If the value is too high, you will see front tucks like you saw when I was at 100%. If it's too low, he basically keeps the bike turning and it'll keep going, and it does not ever want to pull the bike back up. It will stay at kind of full lean or stay at 50 degrees, whatever. So for me, never run it probably below 10%. I know some fast people on this game run around 15%. I'd never go above 60. As you into this window here, it gets to the point where the game, you have what we know in the game is GP bike moments where the bike kind of pings as you go over a bit of elevation. There's some kind of maybe the tarmac can change. There's a lot of things in this game that can really affect the bike. So having a real high direct lean on some curbs, for example, doesn't like it. So again, I would never, if at most, if you like a real snappy bike. I used to run it myself, I think 65%, and I found to the point where a lot of times I take the weight off the bike and he'd set it up so aggressively, he'd tuck the front while sitting it up and it'd crash. Happened to me in multiple league races. So as I've gotten a bit more experience, I've started to turn it down. It's one of those things, right, that I look at as, if you remember the old Call of Duty days, people always used to think, oh, I run super high sensitivity because I'm really fast and really snappy, but everyone was inaccurate. And then you actually found out the pros run it really low because they'd know where to look, because they know what they were doing. I feel the direct lean is very similar. A good rider can run it really low because they don't need a really fast and aggressive bike movement from the rider. If you know where to put the bike and you know where to put the bike going into a corner and corner exit, a lower direct lean works well. And it just for me feels the lower I run it, the smoother the game runs, in terms of I get less tank slappers, the front end doesn't kick around while on power, and it's just the virtual rider, the guy in game that is on the bike that you control. If you put more inputs into him, it's like magnified throughout the bike. So if you can just kind of run a lower direct lean. So if I was advising someone 30 to 40%, unfortunately some of the mods are made in such a way that you kind of nearly need to run a high direct lean because it can be a bit awkward. So 40 at the moment is a sweet spot. Some mods I go 25%. Again, it's one of those things I slightly change. Again, highly recommend jumping in, picking your favorite mod or a couple of mods and just trying it 10%, trying it 90%, and you'll understand what I mean if you didn't already. Now I'm going to quickly run through the rest of these tabs. A lot of them I've already showed off before, but again, if you're a new player, you will not know what a lot of these do. So I'm going to give you a quick breakdown on what you need to know and what you don't need to know. So in the gearbox here, preload does nothing from what I can tell. I've never seen this work in any shape or form. I'm not too sure if modders don't use it in their mod, but I don't see any input in it, so don't run it, don't need to worry about it. These are just key binds, shift up and shift down. For me, shift down is X, shift up is B. So there you go, you can actually see in game it lights up as well as my actual controller overlay. Now, controls, push the bike, I have it pressed down, so down and up. So basically my arrow keys should light up there when I press them. So on my actual keyboard, I push down and up if I need to move the bike. Unfortunately, an Xbox controller or PlayStation controller or any other branded controller only has a limited amount of buttons. This game you need a lot of buttons, so sometimes you do need, unfortunately, to have things bound to the keyboard. Your dashboard, this just cycles through what's on your dash. Again, a lot of these aren't things you'll need every day. Pit limiter, don't ever use it. Just don't speed in the pit. A lot of online race and stuff, or even leagues, there is no speed limiter in the pit, so you can just go flat out, which is a little bit unfortunate, but you can basically get away without using it. The only time you need a pit limiter is you have to do a ride through, and yeah, it can be a bit of a balls if you don't have it set up, as some people have found out. Now your EC mode is just to go through between your engine braking, your traction control, your anti-wheelie, whatever you have, and then ECU plus is just to increase the value. So for example, if you've gone 3 clicks to the right like I have here, and then you go up 1, that's increasing your traction control on a certain mod, for example, if that makes sense. Launch control, I've that bound to my left, that basically limits your RPM. It doesn't really work as well in game, unfortunately. Launch control, the whole point of launch control is to keep the bike in a sweet spot, so when you dump the clutch, the bike stays at its peak power and just goes straight. Whereas on this game, a lot of times what happens is as soon as you release the clutch and on the launch control, it bogs and then wheelies, and then you have to like ride away without the clutch. So a lot of time I don't use it, but that is basically what that does. Reset, when you crash, you have to press the button once to get back on the bike, and if you hold it after 3 seconds, it'll put you back on the track. Track marker, I've just set to M. If you're in testing or offline mode, whatever it's called, the single player, if you set a marker, whenever you hit your reset button, you will spawn on your marker. View settings, pretty self-explanatory. Change view, again, I've it mapped to my keyboard because I don't need it on the actual controller. Look back, just look over your shoulder. Heading is how you look left and right in game, so I will show a clip on screen of me looking left and right, as you'll just understand. That is bound to my right stick, left or right. And tear off, of course, is if you're in first person, you do get flies and pick up on your visor, so you do have in-game tear offs. Gestures, of course, these are your arm waving and your complaints and stuff like that. There is mods for these, so you can get different versions. Again, these you just need to map whatever one you want. Angry, win, complaint, and raise your arm. You can do a lot of things with these. Again, check out GPU Bikes mods. There is kind of updates and mods that you can change these for. For example, there's one where you tap the barrier bike as like kind of giving someone a tow and so that. So there is kind of a few out there these days, which is this. But again, don't really know exactly what each one does because you can't change them in the settings. And your chat, of course, is your chat box in game. For me, it is right on my keyboard again because I don't need it on the controller. I rarely actually chat too much in games. A lot of time I have chat turned off as I don't like seeing messages in while I'm racing. Input 3 menu is all about the replay camera on the left here. So you'll see basically I have all this bound to my controller so that in the replay cam I can fly around and do everything with my controller. From default, you'll probably see it's all bound to your keyboard WASD keys, I'd imagine, and stuff like that. But I've rebound everything so it's on my controller. The only thing really in the actual actual system you need to know about is if you play in VR, the reset button, a lot of people know the VR reset is basically just to center your screen. Once you get into game, you need sometimes on some mods to move forward in your seat, move back, you need to change where your head position is. So again, I have it bound to my keyboard, and that just sets a good kind of version of where I need to be at. Now, the graphics tabs is really, really important, especially for overall performance of the game. This game is quite old, but also runs really weird and is not GPU heavy, it's CPU heavy, as I found out for a long time where I was being kind of bottlenecked by my CPU. So I'm going to run through a lot of things that you can improve or turn off to get more FPS and just overall better performance, and stuff you do not want to change or you will ruin your gaming experience. So in your screen here, you have resolution, basically whatever resolution your screen is running at that. I run borderless. This is just your windowed option. You can run it in a window, borderless or full screen. If you're in full screen, makes no difference really. The only reason I recommend running borderless if you have two screens or if you stream like I do. When it's borderless, I can go to my second screen like I am now, and I'm now on OBS. You can't see that because the screen is still working in the background. Because it's borderless, it just captures whatever's playing. It doesn't freeze up. In full screen, it completely halts the game, and you have to, as you tab out, whatever the last frame was on screen is what just stays, and you're stuck with that. Make sure never run VSync. VSync smooths out the gameplay, tries to give you more FPS and stuff, ends up putting a input lag into the game. Never run that on any form of racing game, not just only GP bikes. It's one of those things where it's good if you're playing a story player game where it's a bit more slow pace, not good in a racing game any way, shape or form. Anti-aliasing, if you run it higher, a nice clean image you get. To run it lower, you get more sharp, rough edges, kind of a lot of pixelation around the edges of stuff. Not really nice to look at, but it is a good way to get FPS back. So if you are struggling, maybe decrease this slightly. But again, I do recommend always play with these settings yourself, because it is a good way to understand your game and your own system. Screen ratio, again, just make sure you run on whatever your resolution is. If you set it to resolution here, whatever you set up here, it will match and you will have no issues. Now, textures are huge. This is really important, this bit. You see here, texture size, basically never adjust this. If you're playing online and you turn this down, what will happen is when someone loads into the game, so someone joins your lobby, the game will stutter and freeze. Always make sure your size is on high. What I believe the actual issue is, if you turn it down, when someone loads in, it compresses the textures for a second or something, is what I've been told. Basically, you don't really need to know what it does. Just don't ever run it low. We've all tried running it low basically to get a bit more FPS, and what it does, it creates massive stuttering and lag when people join and leave the lobby. So again, filtering and anisotropic, you want to run these as same as the anti-aliasing. Higher, better image, nicer gameplay, everything looks good, also eats into FPS. I kind of don't go at the filtering. I just change this from 16 to 18 down up as you go. It has nearly the same effect as the anti-aliasing, where it just kind of makes a sharper image, cleaner image, higher it is, and the lower you run it doesn't look as nice. Pretty self-explanatory. Now up here in the lighting, dynamic shadows, you have shadows, reflections, you have reflections, shaders. The game doesn't look like it's made out of Play-Doh. HDR, don't ever run it. It creates black squares on your screen for most people. Also adds nothing to the game, eats into FPS. Just don't ever run it. Shaders, if you turn these off, you will get a good performance boost, but the game does literally look like it's made out of Play-Doh. Yeah, reflections, it looks weird if you have no reflections. It looks even weirder if you have no shadows. But again, if you go back to some of my whole League Racing videos, you can count your money that I've all these turned off and the game looks terrible, but that's just how I had to compete to kind of get results back in the day. Now, your detail level is a really good way of getting FPS back. So your draw distance is simply how far the game renders. I have it set to maximum because thankfully these days my PC is strong, and regardless if there's 1 or 50 people in the lobby, I can pretty much not worry that at any track I can pretty much get away with getting at least 70 to 120 FPS pretty at any moment. So for me, I run everything to make the game look as good as possible while I play. You can see I've pretty much everything maxed out. So again, draw distance, decrease this at your own peril. What will happen is you might notice some of the GP tracks will say, like Qatar for example, you come out of the last corner, turn 1 isn't even been rendered in and you're on the way to it. If you have it too low, can kind of annoy you and break the game. That things pop in while you ride, it really is a bit of a distraction. So I wouldn't run this ever, maybe lower than very high. If you're really struggling for performance, you probably have no choice, but yeah, definitely try to keep this higher, just because things popping in and out while riding never looks good. Model detail, this is just how detailed the model is. This is a good way to gain FPS. Higher, game looks better. Lower, more performance. Again, for me, I've no problem running it high, but this is something I definitely recommend. It makes everything look a little bit shitty, but at the same time, it does really work. So can't really argue with that. Track screens, you will see a lot of some tracks, especially the Melandri tracks, have screens on the track and they will play back live footage of what's going on track. Eats into FPS. I never really see the point of it personally. It's cool maybe for screenshots. I'm sure there's people out there who like it. It's just you're basically playing a replay of whatever's going on around the track. It's just more resources being used, to be honest. And 3D grass, I only have this enabled for screenshots. I rarely actually run it. I'll put a little still on screen of not 3D grass versus 3D grass on screen, and you'd see it does look a lot better, but while riding at 160, 70 miles an hour, you don't see if the grass is 3D or not. Now, the MISC is pretty basic enough stuff. The only thing I will say in here is keep your bandwidth always on very high. Auto chat is just your quick chats. They're set from 1 to 9 on your keyboard, 1 to 0 actually, technically. Type in here whatever you want, you hit the keyboard key binding and it'll pair in chat and game. Track, disable chat. I usually have this enabled. If the X is in the box, it's enabled. So disable chat, you can't see messages while on screen on in game. Hide names, that hides names of other riders while online, so you can't see the name. A lot of time, depending on your camera angle, it can clip through into your vision, which is a bit annoying in some aspects. 2D flags are pretty example or pretty understandable. It appears on screen the 2D flag or whatever flag is being waved in whatever sector you're in. Audio, again, very basic. Master volume is overall sound, your level overall. Brake volume is how much brake squeal you get. Onboard aero is just a wind noise, simply as that. Remote bikes is the bikes around you. Louder, everyone around you sounds like they're on 2 strokes. Quieter, much easier to hear your own bike. User interface is just, you will notice that when I click on things like this, you don't hear any of the kind of pinging noise that you hear in most gameplays. So again, for example, turn up. It doesn't actually do it until you save it, but basically it just, every time you click or go over or highlight something, it makes a noise, which I don't need. Unit, date, format, again, depending on where in the world you are, it'll be whatever you want to run. I run date, month, year, and the UK one just because I get whatever ones I want out of that. Pretty basic enough stuff in here, but again, I'll still just explain it quickly. Onboard view, pretty much onboard view stuff. It's pretty stuff that you kind of need to just play with yourself. Field of view, most people at this point will know it's kind of pretty much what your field of view is, how much like you're zoomed in and zoomed out. Really close, low number is really zoomed in. That will give you a much slower gameplay, but you will see less and everything will come at you a bit slower. The opposite is for if you set it to 90, you get real fast. Everything looks like it's going so much faster. It'll be the kind of Fast and Furious blur past your eyes, and you'll get a real weird fisheye effect. So again, play with these. Your pitch and your tilt is just how the head of the rider is kind of basically from default and how he leans and stuff. All these free look and stuff and the corner and the heading, play around with these. There's no point me explaining these, to be honest, because it just does different things to the head. You'll notice them in game, but they're pretty easy to see. Again, I don't actually have good settings for these because these were given to me by a sub in a stream and I don't actually particularly like these, so I wouldn't even copy these. Best thing to do with the onboard view, spend a half an hour, go one end of the scale to the other end of the scale, go right, I really don't like it when the field of view is high, and just go through and just start to tinker yourself. When it comes to view settings, it's nearly always better to just do them yourself and then take someone else's settings because they're nearly always better by yourself. So the external view, these 3 boys are to do with how the camera works with how the bike leans and stuff. Again, try these and see what you think. For me, the main things you need to know in here, distance is how far the camera is away from the bike, and the height is basically how it pivots around the bike. So a really high one, you're looking down, a really low one, you're like directly behind the bike. So again, these are my settings. Try them if you want, but again, I can't suggest enough that you try your own settings. I'm giving you the information, just go ahead and try and make your own ones. You will thank me in the long run. So riding aids, automatic shift obviously is automatic gears. Shift help, rider will use the clutch on downshifts and upshifts, can be helpful on some mods, but a lot of mods don't need to be actually run. Automatic clutch is just when you put into gear that the bike doesn't stall, that the rider knows that the bike is stopped and he'll hold the clutch. And also if you just put into gear and accelerate away and use the throttle, he will release the clutch and roll away. Pretty self-explanatory again. So the next 3, traction, wheelie and brake help, basically are just electronic aids. So basically think of these as traction control, anti-wheelie and like ABS. Again, don't really ever run these and it'll be slower for you overall in the long run. You're better off learning how to ride without them or use the actual real in-game traction control through the mod. It's much better. Automatic for rider, front, back, left, right, lean. Basically the bike, he'll tuck in himself, he'll lean back while you're braking, he'll lean left when the bike is going left, he'll lean right when the bike's gone right. It's pretty basic. Again, although a lot of MX bikes players manually control these because it's more important on motocross to control the rider, whereas on a GP style short circuit game, much more intuitive just to leave them on automatic. You can control them, some people do, some fast people do, but for me, my brain is small. Show best line is basically just a racing line. It's not really good, I wouldn't recommend it. I think it's per track base, it's done by whoever makes the mods, so it's never really perfect. Again, I'd never recommend these in any racing game because you will learn a lot more by not running them. Automatic automatic tire change. Basically, when you come into the pits, they'll put a fresh set of tires on each time. You won't go back out in the same tires. You can turn this off if you're doing maybe a long run and you want to kind of test out some tire wear and stuff like that. But again, most people have these on because when you come in, you get a fresh set of tires, you go back out and change whatever setup you've done. And the final thing in today's video is stability help. Now, this limits your lean, so you can't overlean. You will notice in some corners that if you go to full lean, the bike just slides out from underneath you and you go past the lean. If you turn on stability help, basically it'll stop you leaning. It just gives you like a 1 or 2% lean offset at the very end of the maximum lean, which just helps you from overleaning, but it is of course slower because you're not leaning as far. If you're new to the game, maybe try this. For my first 100, maybe 200 hours I ran this, and then I kind of realized fairly quickly it was a limiting factor and it was actually slowing me down. I turned it off. It was a bit of a pain to kind of get understanding of how the front worked. Some people's mods are really hard to ride without stability help, but after a while you understand how it works and you kind of pretty much ride around it, and it's much quicker to run it off. So then that is where we're going to leave it. If you do have any questions, feel free to drop a comment down below, or you could even join my Discord and get better access there to me, and I can show you and help you a bit more there. But I hope you have enjoyed this one. Again, I felt like it was just time to update this video because in the thousands of hours I put into this game, I have learned things, I have changed things ever so slightly. So for me, it was important just to kind of give a more up-to-date video and just show off some things that I've changed and learned over the last 3 years playing this game. Thank you for watching. I hope you have enjoyed. Drop a like, subscribe, and I shall catch you in a future GP Bikes video to not so distant future. Thank you for watching. Slán go fóill.